Is this on? Good evening, everyone. I invite everybody to come and take a seat so we can start the program. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hold on. Good evening, everyone. All right, thank you so much. I am really grateful to see so many familiar faces in this beautiful, beautiful space today. Feeling the energy and the warmth in this room is really refreshing after the last few weeks that we've had, considering some tough news, right? I'm grateful for all of you for joining us tonight, and I want to give a special thanks to our partners, Chicago Public Library, Commissioner Chris Brown and his staff, Kim Reynolds, staff from the Carter G. Woodson Regional Library, the Vivian Harsh Collection, Stacy Williams, who's here, and Raquel Flores Clemens. I want to give thanks to the CFW staff who worked so diligently to make tonight possible, but also to Dr. Toni Bond and Ms. Natalie Moore for helping make this critical conversation possible. Captioning and ASL interpretation are available, so I invite those who may need the services to sit closer to the stage. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered this evening on the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, in a state that is also the territory of Ho-Chunk, Miami, Anoka, Menominee, Sac, Fox, and their descendants. We acknowledge and honor the original people of the land and the native people who remain on the land today. Chicago Foundation for Women has long believed in women's rights to bodily autonomy since our inception. As part of our access to health and education focus area, reproductive justice has been at the core. Trusting women with their bodies was a radical idea in 1985, and surprisingly, it still is today. Tonight's conversation centered on reproductive justice is not only timely, but critical. It's critically important, and our work is modeled after the approach presented by Dr. Toni Bond and her colleagues that began in 1994. During tonight's conversation, you may hear the phrase women and people who may become pregnant or pregnant people, which is our way of honoring all the identities and individuals impacted by these issues. Since 2008, CFW has invested over $3.3 million in reproductive justice, mostly through our Catalyst Fund for Reproductive Justice. And during the last year, we've invested more than $460,000 to support various organizations, from direct service providers to advocacy organizations, focusing on women of color-led grassroots organizations. And in addition to our portfolio of grant funding for reproductive justice, we work with networks of individual donors, corporations, and other foundations to help them make strategic investments in women and girls throughout Chicago, including additional direct support of reproductive justice organizations. In our current grant-making cycle, we are near the end of the fiscal year, hallelujah. In partnership with the Pritzker Family Foundation, we will be increasing our investments in reproductive justice by making an additional $182,000 worth of grant awards to support capacity and network building among grassroots reproductive justice organizations, strengthening the sector as a whole. And we'll be talking about this more later. And it's an honor to hold space with Dr. Bond for tonight's conversation and to work with her to strengthen reproductive justice in our region. Her work has informed our approach at CFW and was also a huge part of Natalie Moore's most recent work, The Billboard. Natalie has shared a clip of the play, which we will view now.
I decided to do something bold, a statement, a message that will put Black women first and everyone else on notice. BWHI has to stand up for Black women, even if it's in a way that will alienate, shock, and force people to be uncomfortable. I mean, let's be honest, listening to and affirming Black women is a radical act.
Yeah, enough with the throat clearing. Show me the mock-up. Black women have the right to make decisions for their families and their bodies. Abortion is self-care. Hashtag trust Black women.
What do you think?
The picture of these three Black women hee-hawing looks like they're about to toast with Prosecco at a bottomless brunch. What is the message? Celebrate abortion?
Yes, women celebrating their ability to do what's best for their lives.
This is a lot to take in. Not what I had in mind for a billboard. I was thinking something along the lines of abortion is legal or protect abortion rights. I don't know, a message less inflammatory. Your idea plays right into the hands of the anti-choice operatives demonizing Black women.
No, if we're saying trust Black women, then trust Black women fully and wholly.
Do we really want to equate abortion with self-care?
I firmly believe it is, Dawn. I mean, we can't respond with a sweet BWHI PSA. We have to clap back.
Self-care is bubble baths, candles, a girls' trip, wine, spa treatments.
That's superficial self-care and a capitalistic way to imagine self-care. Black women can't fully take care of themselves by spending money on facials. They need healing.
I'll concede the point on self-care, but self-care is marketed as a fluffy slipper, fluffy robe, candles around the bathtub lifestyle. Abortion as self-care?
Self-care is therapy. It's access to health care. Self-care is taking care of your mental, emotional, and physical needs. Self-care is stress reduction. It's eliminating anxiety. It's putting your needs first. And that, for some women, includes abortion. Do you trust Black women?
Excuse me?
Do you trust Black women? I mean, really trust them?
I don't trust this billboard. This campaign could undermine our work, our funding, our abortion services, put at risk our prenatal services, breastfeeding advocacy, STI testing, HIV services, our brilliant Black Girls program, our safe queer space. If we're not here, where will the Mrs. Pratts go for cancer screenings or the Mrs. Joneses for their diabetes medication?
The point of this billboard is to change the perception and stigma around abortion. I don't agree with the feelings of sadness. Many patients who come here feel relief when they walk out of our doors. The idea of sadness or gravity ties to the idea of shame and grief. We have to change the narrative around abortion.
You're saying women do cartwheels after a procedure?
No, at least not in our waiting room, but maybe in their homes. Listen, everyone should be allowed to feel any way they want about abortion. And not everyone feels joy around pregnancy, even though society says that they should. This is why autonomy is important.
Okay, Tanya, but your billboard plays right into those vicious anti-choice hands.
Demetrius's billboard is toxic for our community, and especially harmful for Black women who have always had to contend with others telling them what to do or not to do with their bodies.
The men who say Black mothers are dangerous will weaponize our message. The Hoteps will come after us.
Fuck the no-taps.
We'll lose the people who are pro-choice. A billboard like this on 59th and Halsted will be accused of trying to wipe out the Black population in a community where the population is already declining. Get rid of the Black people who live here. Open the neighborhood up to the white hipsters with their handlebar mustaches and their craft beers. We are handing over the keys to Demetrius. I can hear the eugenics chatter now from people who are on our side.
Here we go, the ghost of Margaret Sanger haunting us from beyond.
Ground yourself in reality.
We are not Planned Parenthood. We can't let Margaret Sanger's racism of the past define who we are today.
You can't erase her.
It's true, but don't allow her to co-opt our mission and define us. Listen, I understand how this would be seen as controversial, but I think it's worth it for us to control the message, especially since it's our mission. It requires us to serve this community, and our community members have the right to make their own decisions.
Abortion is legal in this country. It's the law of the land. That's the message we should be trying to promote.
It's not that simple. Television and pop culture completely warp our sensibilities around abortion. We think of a teenager who can't cope, a downtrodden woman, a woman who was raped. But those are single abortion stories. There are others. While we may not agree with a woman's decision to have an abortion, or we may think she should do something different, honoring her right to choose is what we must do. The best analogy I can come up with is divorce.
Divorce?
Yes, divorce. Say a woman finds out she has terminal cancer, rapidly spreading, and the doctor says she has 3 months to live. Her husband can't cope, he asks for a divorce. We find that behavior reprehensible, immoral perhaps, but we don't outlaw divorce because of that one individual.
I get it, but all publicity is not good publicity. We decided on principle not to take Title X money, and our fundraising could take a hit for the non-abortion work we do. I just don't want to take another principled stance that could compromise the safety and well-being of our staff or clients. We've been lucky, Tanya. Protesters don't camp out in front of our offices. We've never seen violence. Hardcore anti-abortionists don't taunt our clients. I worry Demetrius' billboard is a taste of what's to come.
Listen, I want the publicity of this billboard. I welcome it. I'm not afraid. Do you know why I founded BWHI?
To provide a healthy and safe...
No, not just the talking points. I wanted a clinic for people like my grandmother who didn't have insurance but deserved quality medical care. That's why I went to medical school and completed my residency at Cook County. Also, something shifted after I got married. I thought Eric was the love of my life, and we had all these plans, sister medical clinics in Chicago and in Africa. And then a glitch happened with my birth control, and oops, I was pregnant. I wasn't ready though, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to be with him anymore. I knew a baby would be the worst thing at the time. You may not think my abortion was ethical, but it was legal.
I'm a pragmatic numbers woman concerned with safety and longevity. This is risky. But I'll stand next to you. Let's take this to the board for a full vote.
I'm sure am happening right now. So Natalie, thank you. And I, for one, can't wait to see the play. We'll mention this later, but there are flyers. CFW is hosting the play on July 9th. and so there's more information, there are flyers on the table. Tonight's conversation is focused on the ways we as active members of our community can increase awareness about the importance of bodily autonomy for women, trans, and gender non-binary individuals who may become pregnant, and be active in supporting reproductive justice organizations across the Chicago region. So, to help us dig deeper, I'd like to invite Dr. Toni Bond and Miss Natalie Moore to the stage to join me. Come on up. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's
Thank you.
really good to have this powerhouse on the stage. So both of you, I'm really excited. So everyone, bios are included in your programs, and so I want to make sure, because both of these women are extremely accomplished, and we like to celebrate accomplishments. And so I will invite them to share a little bit as we start the conversation, but I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that this is a sensitive issue, and it may trigger emotions for some of us. And I invite you to step away if needed and return to the conversation when you are ready. Dr. Bond, let's start with you. Like, bring yourself into the room and share something with the people.
Wow. Well, let me first say it's good to be back home in Chicago. I will forever be a Chicago girl, even though I live on the West Coast now. What's so good about being back home at this moment is thinking about the work ahead of us, but being very inspired when I look at the huge amount of work that Chicago Foundation for Women is about to take on, and when I think about some of the grassroots organizations who are going to be a part of that work. And there's just something just very unique to Chicago. I've traveled most of the places in this country, but Chicago is just different. The flavor, the neighborhood, the culture, what it means to be Black, and to exist, it's just different. And so it's just very good to be back home.
We're glad to have you here. I'm gonna share something. So on her first night back, y'all know what she got to eat?
Harold's, I bet. Am I right? Did I guess right?
I did, but as I shared with Felicia, I had Harold's, but apparently I didn't go to
She ordered from the wrong one.
Which one did you go to?
See, it's
I don't want to say that. I don't want to say
that'll be a
that.
whole, nope, that'll be a whole
Right,
other conversation.
but I didn't go to the Harold's, and so, as we say, they done me wrong. But I can't have any more Harold's because I hit my one Harold limit.
Ms. Natalie Moore, could you please bring yourself into the room and share something with the people?
You know what, I think I should have set up the clip that we saw before we watched it, so I'll just backtrack. Those are not actors from the play. I was in DC in April, and the National Women's Law Center sponsored a panel about because it was, the book had just come out, and the producer hired 2 local actresses to do a read, and then the producer created that billboard, which was amazing, that I think we are going to use in our production. And Fatima Goss-Graves runs the National Women's Law Center, and after we watched the clip and then we sat down, she said, it's like you were listening in on the conversations that we're having.
No way!
She said the exact same thing. So now I feel even more confident, like having her say that made me feel like I was on the right track. And I was doing research and talking to people and trying to be attuned on the issues, but that was a great vote of confidence. And then to hear you say that, it means that I'm depicting and doing what this art should be doing.
So let me just say this. It's a little bit intimidating because y'all know what Natalie does for a living, and here I am up here playing like interviewer, and she's the person who's usually doing the interviewing. So at our last lunch, well, not our last luncheon, but you or
before before times,
right? You interviewed Elaine Welteroth for us, so thank you. All right, so everyone in the audience, I have a few questions to start, but if you have questions, the CFW staff is around. We have note cards. We can bring your questions up and we can get them, write them down for the Q&A portion, but I will get it started. Dr. Bond, in 1994, you were among 12 women who coined the phrase reproductive justice. Can you please share with us what does reproductive justice actually mean? I say the actually because that's kind of important, I think.
Sure. I think it's important to, I'll share what it means and then I'll tell you the why.
Yes.
Right? So reproductive justice, the short definition, is about the human right to have a child, to not have a child, to parent the children that one has with the social and economic supports that a family needs, not just to survive, but to thrive, and the right to bodily autonomy and sexual pleasure. Reproductive justice rests upon two groundings. First, the human rights framework, and then Black feminist theory. And so when we came together, we took the politics of reproductive rights and social justice and pulled from the human rights framework, pulled from Black feminist theory, Black feminist thought, and came up with this amazing framework that has sustained the test of time and, quite frankly, has created a paradigm shift in how we think about what it means to dismantle forms of reproductive and sexual oppression. The reason that we came up with the term was because we were all gathered at a conference here in Chicago, sponsored by the Men's Foundation for Women and the Illinois Pro-Choice Alliance in June of '94. And this was a conference to talk about universal health care reform. There were 150 folks in attendance at the conference, 12 Black women. So once we got through hearing the presentations, there was one particular presentation by a representative from the Clinton administration talking about their proposal that they were going to put forth for universal health care reform, which didn't include any coverage for reproductive and sexual health care. So imagine this individual being at a conference full of reproductive health and rights activists presenting a proposal for universal health care reform that didn't include coverage for reproductive and sexual health care. So we decided to caucus, as Black women will oftentimes do, and we piled into one of our hotel rooms, and we started to talk about what was it that we were seeing. We were all at organizations across the country working on reproductive health, reproductive rights issues, doing work around the international community, global development work. But we talked about what were the reproductive and sexual health issues that were confronting the Black women that we worked with. And we realized that at the conference, the topic was primarily about abortion access. And we knew that abortion, while critically important to Black women, was one aspect of a broader umbrella of reproductive and sexual health needs. So that is the why. And also we needed a way to talk about not just our reproductive and sexual health, but to connect that to the material realities of our lives, and to bring in an analysis that talked about or highlighted how these issues intersect. That in order to get an abortion, you need money, and in order to have money, you need a living wage, right? And so all of these social economic issues were interconnected. And so in addition, we also knew that white supremacy and systemic racism were intricately a part of why particularly Black women were experiencing reproductive and sexual health disparities. So we needed a way to talk about the impact of white supremacy and systemic racism.
So I'm thinking about that Clinton administration staffer person who came out here, and they were on what my grandma would call a fool's errand. They came out here half informed. But you said then, and this is 1994, today still, discussions regarding reproductive justice only focus on abortion. It's narrowly focused. And I often feel that when I say those two words, all people hear is abortion. So can you share with us what the 4 pillars of reproductive justice are?
So the right to have a child, and that means the right to have, to make key decision making, the right to have key decision making over what one's birth experience is going to look like, the right to have a midwife, the right to have a doula, to bring in holistic birthing practices, the right to be involved in whether or not you're going to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean section, really involving women and pregnant capable people in the entire birthing experience. And also including under there is the right to access assisted reproductive technologies if you're trying to have a child. There's a misnomer that Black women are overly fertile and that we over reproduce, and that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, Black women have high rates of infertility, owing from things like pelvic inflammatory disease, obesity, but I want to be clear, it's not because we're overeating, but it's because we don't have access to the food that we deserve in our communities. But Black women actually have high rates of infertility. And so the right to access assisted reproductive technologies. Under the right not to have a child, it's about the right to access contraception,
yes,
and not to have certain contraceptives targeted at you because there is a belief that you won't use contraception, or that you need to have a long-acting reversible method of contraception pushed at you. So the right to be able to in consultation with your medical provider, choose the method of contraception that is going to be best for you, that works with your particular lifestyle, and the right to access surgical and medical abortion, among other things. Under the right to parent, the children that you have, with the social and economic supports that you need so that your family can thrive, it's about access to a living wage. All of the social economic supports that families need. So not just a living wage, but clean water, living in communities that are not high in environmental toxins. Urban communities have some of the highest rates of environmental toxins, diesel fuel emissions, because there's a high rate of diesel trucks going in and out of our communities. The right to be able to live in communities where you could maybe grow your own food and not live in communities where the soil is bad and you can't grow any food. And then also the right to live in your communities free of fear from violence, from public actors, private actors, community violence, and the right to live, and this is where we bring in a Black Lives Matter analysis, the right to live in your community free of fear from violence from the state, from overzealous police officers who are constantly, who think that Black people are dangerous overall and place Black and brown bodies under surveillance. And then under the last pillar, which is the right to bodily autonomy and sexual autonomy, it is about the right to experience sexual pleasure and acknowledging that we were all created to experience sexual pleasure, and the right to love who we want to live, and the right to identify ourselves either through a gender lens or a non-gender lens. So those are the 4 pillars.
Thank you so much. Natalie, congratulations on your most recent work, The Billboard. Woo-hoo!
Thank you.
I don't know how she's writing, she's reporting on BZ, writing for the Sun-Times, writing books. Thank you for bringing this work to life. And also for sharing that clip with us and for setting it up. And again, I'm going to repeat this a lot. CFW is hosting a performance of the play July 9th. Information is in the room. So we saw a little bit snippet, but without any spoilers, can you share a little bit more about the play?
Yeah, so I'll do a little bit more setup. So there have been anti-abortion billboards targeting Black women going up around the country for the past 10 years. And I covered them as a reporter when they came to Chicago in 2011. So this play, you gotta have drama in a play. So I said, let's put it in a city council race. So you have a gadfly, so it's set in the Inglewood community. And you have a man named Demetrius Drew, a local gadfly who's running for office. And he puts up a billboard that says, the most dangerous place for a Black child is his mother's womb. Abortion is genocide. Keep Inglewood Black. Vote Demetrius Drew for city council. So there is a fictitious Black women's health initiative in Inglewood. It's a health clinic. They do everything, including abortion services. And so that clip that we saw was the board chair and the executive director, founder, doctor, OBGYN, Inglewood daughter, who's pushing to do the self-care. And so that billboard goes up, and that was inspired by what happened in Dallas. So the anti-abortion billboard that went up in Chicago was put up by the same person in Dallas in 2018. And the Afia Center put up its own self-care billboard. And that billboard was more controversial than the other billboard because people hadn't talked about abortion with self-care. So these two dueling billboards are at the heart of the play. There's a lot of social media theatrics that go on in it. But the play is not just about, so in some ways the play is really a discussion between people who would be considered pro-choice. You know, it's not like bloody fetuses, like it's not, you're not hearing, you're hearing from some people who are against abortion, but I would say the nuance is more what does, it's almost like a reproductive rights versus reproductive justice kind of conversation. And so the people who are in the work are going to recognize that, and then the people who aren't, I think, are going to learn, but also just hopefully enjoy it because it is theater. And yeah, so that's the, there's an incumbent city council woman, but the play also speaks to who gets to speak for community. And that's why I said it in Inglewood. So even though I created Demetrius, sometimes I don't really know how he feels about abortion. Like he's one of these, well, let me say this. Black men are victims of patriarchy too. So while we have white men saying, go make babies, white women, to save the race, you have Black men who believe Black power, the Black family is going to save us and you should have these babies. So he does believe that, but he's not an evangelical. And he's never gotten any traction all the other times he's run for office until now. So he's opportunistic, and so that's what leads him here. And then Tanya really gets a little too caught up in, we gotta change the narrative, we gotta change the narrative, and gets a little distracted along the way.
And Tanya's the ED.
Yes.
And so thinking about a lot is going on today, and so I'm sure you can draw a lot of parallels from the play to the conversations that are happening. And you mentioned you were in DC, in Chicago, this billboard was up in Dallas, so these conversations are going on. So what are some of the parallels that you think are relevant to point out?
So when I started writing this, I read Loretta Ross, I read Dorothy Roberts, Killing the Black Body, I saw Dr. Bond's archives, and I had to get up to speed on a lot. And when I've started, I have a Q&A with Dr. Bond in the book. And so many Black women have thought, oh, I thought reproductive rights was just, they thought I was just using the term justice because people use justice now, I would say more mainstream. And the director is a Black woman, Tehran Patton, and she was drawn to direct this not because it was about abortion, But she really loved that there were these 4 Black intergenerational women in the play. And for her in theater, you don't see that. So that's what she really took from it. I have a wonderful dramaturg. The stage manager says she's never seen a dramaturg put a so a dramaturg helps the director and puts this, among other things, makes the cast read a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes.
And this, I can't even call it a PowerPoint. It was amazing.
A master class.
Yeah. I didn't even know that Google could do these kind of decks. And the director said, I didn't know. She's like, I'm still learning so much. I didn't know that rights and justice were 2 different things. So through this process, I feel like I'm explaining that, or, you know, because it's not my words, but I'm amplifying others and putting the ideas out there. So that's really coming across. And even other Black feminist friends of mine, because this, you know, isn't their wheelhouse. And they're like, oh, like, okay, I get this, in understanding those specific definitions has been illuminating for so many people. Yeah,
I am sure there will be aha moments on both sides when people sit in the auditorium, in the theater for the play. Dr. Bond, Black women's reproductive health issues are often neglected. I can go over a bunch of stats. I will not. How have Black women contributed to the conversation of reproductive justice, and why is it so central that their voices are heard?
Well, I think first and foremost that Black women's biggest contribution is that they coined the term.
Say that part. Okay. I'm sorry.
It came from Black women. And again, the reason that we came up with the term was because we needed a way to talk about our lived experiences in such a way that brought in the intersectionalities of our lives. And a way to talk about what it meant for us not to just transcend one barrier, but multiple barriers simultaneously. It's interesting to, you know, when you talk about how, you know, initially reproductive justice wasn't co-opted. People just got it wrong. But now it's almost like there's a co-optation. Everybody wants to be in a reproductive justice organization. And so I always say, we don't need everybody to be a reproductive justice organization. We need reproductive health organizations who provide the social services, who are the clinics, who are the clinic providers. We need reproductive rights organizations who are doing the policy work, applying the legal lens, using the US Constitution to fight back battles, even though, I know we're all optimistic, but Roe is going to fall. And then we need the reproductive justice movement. And those are the folks who are doing the movement building and the grassroots organizing, which we need. I think the way in which Black women, at the core of reproductive justice is about recognizing people's humanity.
Yes.
If you don't recognize people's humanity first, right, then you completely ignore our existence. You can't, the thing about reproductive justice, you can't do this work from this existentialist point of view. So reproductive justice is about recognizing people's humanity. And when you recognize people's humanity, you recognize their human dignity. And when you recognize people's human dignity, you recognize that they have human capabilities. And so what reproductive justice gives us is a framework to challenge the government, the country that we live in, who has signed on to very few international treaties.
Yes.
But it gives us a way to call them in when we can, call them out when we can, and to hold to say you have a level of responsibility to ensure that people, that the conditions exist for people to realize human rights so we can have human flourishing. That is the role of the government, to ensure that its citizens have the right to realize certain human rights, to live in certain human conditions, to support the human flourishing. And when the government doesn't do that, it has failed. And so that is, I think, one of the biggest contributions that Black women gave to the health and rights movements, a different way to think about what it means to do this work. Because even in using the term pro-choice for Black, Indigenous people of color alludes to this marketplace of options that we've never had access to. What does it mean to have choice? In order to have choice, you have to have access.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So thinking about you touched on a lot there, but you talked about like the intersectional, different oppressions that Black women have faced. And I want to explore and have you talk about how that really impacts like the community at large. Like how does a Black woman's ability for self-determination, or Kujichagulia, if y'all believe in Kwanzaa principles, how does that correlate to the community as a whole?
Sure. The short answer to that is that if Black women and Black pregnant capable people can't be self-autonomous,
yes,
then we can't be free and liberated as a community.
That line's in my book from her also.
So if Black women and Black pregnant people can't make decisions, when you take the ability to make decisions about your reproductive and sexual lives, that's a pathway to controlling entire communities. When you take people.
Wait, can you say that part one more time? Yes.
Now you want me to remember what I said.
It's a pathway. So I remember because I'll write it down.
Communities.
Right.
When you take away people's ability to control their reproductive and sexual autonomy, then it is a direct pathway to controlling entire communities. I mean, the reality is that when Roe falls, there's a part of the analysis that talks about the reason why anti-choice Christian fundamentalists want to overturn Roe v. Wade, which situates the desire to increase the birth weight of the white population. But the other side to that is what will happen for Black and brown women, and particularly Black women who, if we just look at Illinois, die 3 times more than white women from pregnancy-related complications.
Yes.
So if we know that,
Yes.
and now we're saying we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade and preclude them from being able to get access to safe abortions, so now we're going to force people to have babies, right? And if we already know that Black women have higher rates of maternal mortality and morbidity, it stands to reason that we will have even more Black women faced with higher rates of maternal mortality and morbidity. So what are we doing, right? And so who are we trying to punish?
Right.
And so yet again, we have to go back to that history, that very difficult history of enslaved Black women, where they were not able to control their fertility, forced to be breeders for this country. The added difference is now that more Black women will die from pregnancy-related complications. So it makes one think, what is the larger context that we have to be thinking about, that larger context? I mean, even for, we think about, and I don't know if I jumped ahead, but
No, but go ahead.
But even when we think about even further Roe being overturned, we should all be scared.
Yes.
We should be terrified, because it is going to be massive numbers of women and pregnant capable people who will not be able to get the abortions that they need. And Illinois is in a very unique situation. It is surrounded by 6 states that will have bans on abortion. And when we talk about even the state of Illinois, it's Chicago and the surrounding suburbs that are liberal. But there are big parts of Illinois that are not as liberal. So when Roe falls, there will be all of these individuals who will be coming to Chicago for services, and then the surrounding Midwestern states, the 6. And then you go out, there are states, eastern states, that will rely upon Illinois. And so we should all be very frightened, because the other thing is it won't just be the individuals who need services, but I think about the providers, the abortion providers, and not just the physicians and the nurse midwives and the advanced practice clinicians. I think about the people on the front line. When you go into the clinic, I think about the people in the front desk. Because at the front desk, because typically, when violence happens at clinics, it's the frontline clinic staff who are in the direct line of danger. And I also think about what it means to be a black woman doing this work, and I realize the security risk that even Black RJ activists face. That now it means we have to take certain precautions that we have not had to take. Right? But now we need to think about security in different ways. We need to think about our mail being surveilled. We need our internet and the places where we live and all of these different things. Even speaking in a public square, what does that mean? What does security look like? Going to a rally, there's a huge rally this weekend in DC, which I will be at, that I have been thinking, ooh, I sure hope they have some good security, because we live in a time where people are being surveilled, and Black women have always been under surveillance because we've never been trusted to be in our bodies, right? Or we've never been trusted to control our bodies. And so now we're talking about a heightened level of surveillance that I don't think any of us are prepared for.
I really think that this is an important point, and so for everyone in this room to understand that safety and security part, what that really will look like moving forward. Well, and Natalie, you reminded me about the billboards. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You reminded me about the billboards. I remember when the billboard was here in Chicago, and it was in Inglewood, on the side of a vacant building that said, as you said, the most dangerous place for a Black child is the.
They had the every 21 minutes.
Yeah.
The leader is aborted with a picture of Obama's face.
Right. But I remember being at that event, whatever it was, that it was by Life Always. Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing was that the billboard was on the side of a vacant building facing this empty lot that was filled with glass and needles and all sorts of garbage. And I was like, so what message are you really trying to put forth in this community, right? But being at this event and having, I don't even know if he's still living, Joe Scheidler, who was head of the Illinois Right to Life, and one of my staff members, Cherie Scott, who leads Sister Reach in Memphis now. But he walked up, and Joe Scheidler was about 6'4", very scary. And he walked up like this close to her face, right? And pointed in her face and said, "It was your Black child who was breaking into my house." Now, her son was 6 years old at the time. And I'm just saying, this is how like way out some of these folks are. And I just remember myself and the then ED of the Chicago Abortion Fund, Galen Alcarez. We saw him and we literally ran and put our bodies in between him and the staff person. But think about the risk that we took. That was risky.
Right.
And so I don't know that we have really thought through what this is going to be. I mean, this is going to be something we have never experienced or could have imagined.
And in that clip, you might have recalled Dawn, the board chair, saying, "We've been lucky. People don't camp out in front of our clinic." And that is a through line in the play. It was like, well, what about security? And Tanya's like, you know, Demetrius is a nobody. Like, we have a bubble zone. Like, you can't, in Chicago, the law says you can't get this close. It's not that big of a deal. And she's like, yeah, but you don't know what this can grow into. And then with, I don't know if it's art imitating life or vice versa, we had a call, a Zoom with the theater, and it was, so should we have security at the theater? And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I am in my play. And we have some talkbacks, and the director was like, I don't think we should have talkbacks. And I was like, well, if somebody's already, I was like, no, I absolutely disagree with that. We should still have talkbacks. Aren't we having a talkback with you? But the actors don't have to be involved, or the crew. But these were real conversations. And so, you know, on our cast sheet, it's like, okay, head of security downtown at Northwestern.
Yes.
And I do feel, at least being in a Northwestern building, that there's security, that's because it's by the hospital, it's on campus.
It's downtown.
Yeah, so these were, because I think it's easy, it was like, oh, it's Chicago, like this doesn't.
Right. And that's why I started, because there are providers, there are nonprofits here, there are women in this room who talk about this issue. And I wanted to highlight this point because we haven't had to live in this state of heightened awareness or vigilance around this issue. And so thinking about what that means for organizations, you know, for people who speak publicly on this issue and advocate for women, thinking about what that means. The other thing too is the other side of this is the harm that will be caused, because I think Dr. Bond is trying to break it to us gently, or to y'all, or to all of us. Like, she just said it kind of soft, but when Roe, in case you're holding out hope, I think you said that, like, in case y'all are holding out hope, it is over, and then we have to be thinking about what it is post-Roe, right? You know, having conversations around that. And so I think that's extremely important. I saw another documentary recently, and this other side of it, there was a whole wing at Cook County Hospital for septic abortions, where women who had problematic abortions, who had tried to do it themselves, were dying. And that is heartbreaking. And we already know, you talked about people coming to Illinois, so far, this has got a chilling effect. 10,000 women came to Illinois in 2020 for abortion care. Now, this is prior to what we are presently, this is prior to the leak, and so those numbers are only growing. So I'm going to shift a little bit, because there is a body of research here. I mean, it's the body that Natalie used. So you donated your papers, and also we're sitting in a Chicago Public Library, and I love libraries and books, so I want to give a shout out. So you donated your research papers to the Vivian G. Harsh Research Collection of the African American History and Literature at Carter G. Woodson. It's a regional library, South Side, stand up, regional library on 95th and Halsted. And it's the largest, that collection is the largest African American history and literature collection in the Midwest. So it's pretty significant.
Shout out Raquel.
Yes.
Director of Harsh.
So, Dr. Bond, can you discuss why it was important for you to donate your collection and the significance of preserving this history? Why?
Why? I actually just shared this with Raquel. I said, so the Sophia collection at Smith College, actually on the East Coast, they wanted my archives, and I said, no, my records have to stay here in Illinois, because this is where reproductive justice started. And this is where, at the time, I'd done the bulk of my work. And when the full history gets written about the origins of reproductive justice, I wanted it to say, as it does now, that it started in Illinois. Mm. And the hope, and now CFW is taking up the mantle, the hope was that Illinois would step into its rightful place as a part of the reproductive justice history.
Yeah, yeah. We have seeded that in a lot of respects. And, this wasn't a planned question, but I just have to ask, because coming back and knowing the amount of work, the blood, sweat, and tears that y'all put into this, and to see the fractured state of things, how that might feel to you.
I'm hopeful, okay. Right? The organization that I helped to co-found Black Women for Reproductive Justice, we were around for 15 years. And we did some phenomenal work on the billboards, Black women's health conferences, talk about working with Black men at the intersection of reproductive justice. I remember getting a call from some, I won't say which group, because they would always do this. The week before the rally, a protest was going to happen. Call you the week before, and you're supposed to go out and run and organize the entire community in less than a week. And so what they said was, there's going to be an anti-choice rally on the south side of Chicago, on the corner of 79th and Stony Island. I said, say what? And they said, well, can you organize? I said, first of all, there's no way I can organize the kind of people that it will take for that rally. And so I started thinking, and I said, well, what can we do? We got to have some kind of presence. And I got the bright idea that I was going to go and have a sit down with the Nation of Islam. And so I called and I said, I don't know where this is going to go.
Another anecdote in my book, if you want to read more.
I don't know where this is going to go.
That's why they have to come and see the play.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm going to try to see it. Plus, I've never been to the mosque. I would really like to see what it looks like, because I hear it's beautiful. And so I called and I, said who I was and said I wanted to meet, and they were very gracious and said, come on over. Yes. And I went and met, and, the leadership was extremely gracious and said, how can we help? And I said, listen, I know that we don't agree on this issue. However, I do know what we do agree on is that folks don't have the right to come in our community and tell us what we should do.
That's right.
And they don't have the right to come in our community and tell Black women what they're supposed to do with their bodies. I think we can agree on that.
That's right.
And so he said, yes. And so he said, well, what do you need? I said, well, this is what I need. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be a rally. The anti-choice folks are coming. They're going to have these huge signs with all of these bloody fetuses on there. I said, they're going to be on the corner of 79th and Stony Island. I said, and I know that's where you all are at. I know that's where Fruit of Islam are. I know y'all just saying selling the final call. You're selling the bean pies. He said, well, what you need us to do? I said, exactly what you do. I just need you to be out there and have a presence.
Yes, yes.
And I don't know if word got back, but those people did not show up for that rally.
All right.
So I think that there is a way to have those conversations, right? But I think we have to find the way to connect.
Right. Mm-hmm. And Natalie, so you you did a lot of research, and part of that research was using the collection and Dr. Bond's work. How impactful was that for you, and how did that help shape? I mean, you've shared that there are a few, snippets like this conversation about the nation, But what did that mean to you to have that repository and to be able to go there?
Yeah, well, that anecdote is not in the play. The book
okay.
has a Q&A with Dr. Bond at the end, so you're not just buying a script. I wanted to add some extra content, and so she told me that anecdote that I love. I would say that it's just having authenticity. You know, I want people who are entrenched in this work to watch the play and feel like it's real.
Yeah.
And that might be a small population, but I want it to be I mean, I spent a lot of time writing the budget for this clinic. It never comes up. Well, it does because some funding comes at stake, but you never know what and I had to balance, well, abortion's a cash business. Are they a FQH? Like, I had to do all that. And then, you know, a very, very Black Chicago thing is to ask people, what high school did you go to?
We just say school.
Yeah,
you
don't even say
high
school.
school. You just
say what
and
school
that
did you
way
go to.
It's understood.
I spent a lot, and I tweeted, I was like, I'm so Chicago. I spend all this time figuring out what high school
that tweet.
that my characters, it never shows up in the play. You never know what high school that they go to. But this is character building for me to understand these folks. So,
are you going to tell us what high school?
Sure. So Demetrius's animosity a little bit toward Tanya is that she left the neighborhood to go to school. So she went to Lane Tech.
Ah.
And she also went to Brown for undergrad and U of C for medical school and Harvard for her MPH. And Demetrius went to either Harper or Hubbard. And Cheryl, the city council incumbent, went to CVS. Kayla, the 19-year-old program assistant, went to Robeson. And Dawn is from St. Louis, and she's like, look, I'm not part of all this. Y'all Chicago folks are messy. I'm not from here, but I know how y'all operate. So yeah, that's
so
how I broke it
this
down.
is that you will not. That's not in the book. It's not in the play. Y'all just got an inside
little inside
scoop. All right. And then I was going to ask you, like, what was the most shocking part or surprising part? I mean, it's not surprising what you just said. I mean, for me, because I've had a similar conversation around gun violence and had to go over to meet the nation and ask for some help about some things. But it is a little, I guess for me, that would be a little shocking. But for you, Natalie, what was the most shocking part of talking to Dr. Bond and or going through the resources and the collection?
I'm going to answer it in a little bit of a different way. Well, not shocking, but Dr. Bond's also a Christian theologian. And I think that's really important to highlight that, because I think that's a backstop to the evangelicals, that, she's thinking about these things from a womanist perspective, a Black feminist lens. And, I took pictures and it was like nothing, the Bible doesn't say anything about abortion. And just knowing that those archives were there, I think just the whole experience. But I would say just in general, I went to Memphis and did an event with Choices and Sharice Scott with Sister Reach. And I don't know if you've met Nakia Grayson.
I know Dr. Nakia.
Yes.
So we went to Howard together. And I called her all the time. She's a midwife. And I would be like, okay, what's Title 10? What's the, just all the technical stuff. Like the high level, the low level, and I couldn't have done this without her. So I went to Memphis, and intellectually, you can read about it, you hear about it, what other states are doing. But to go to Tennessee and to see it, I don't know, I just had a different reaction. So Choices is what it is, what it sounds like. They do everything, and it's a beautiful, beautiful space. Yes. She took me by there after the brunch she threw me. It was closed, and there were protesters out there. There were anti-abortion billboards across the street. She told me that they have to cremate all the fetuses, and she's like, and sometimes there's nothing left after that. the trigger laws. I mean, it's just thing after thing, and just understanding how she is, again, you can just be in this bubble in Chicago, and I'm not saying it's completely safe here, but they're really putting their bodies on the line. And she told me before it was public that they were going to take over this clinic in Carbondale, because they knew Roe was going to be, this is before the leak. I mean, everybody who does this work knew Roe was going to be overturned when the Supreme Court took up the case. So I'm thinking you just start thinking about, the Fugitive Slave Act. Like, people like to talk about the Handmaid's Tale. Fugitive Slave Act, body and going after. So, I'm working on this piece now about the history of abortion in Illinois, which it could be a book. So I'm trying to distill all of this information and just, show some flashpoints. But what I'll end with is that the anti-abortion and abortion rights people are saying the work isn't done. The Illinois Right to Life is like, oh, this is ground zero. We're going to be educating. These laws go too far. People don't even know what's happening. And so they are waging their own campaign and will be targeting races. And Representative Kelly Cassidy will be introducing legislation. It's supposed to be this week. I don't know when it's going to. It hasn't happened, but they want to put protections in case Missouri does its version of the Fugitive Slave Act to go after Illinois providers or whoever that is. So it's nothing is done, no matter where you stand and no matter what the opinion is. And one other, I did read the entire Alito decision. Don't understand a lot of it because I don't understand legalese, but I wrote a column about Dr. Bond's archives and mentioned, for the Sun-Times, and mentioned a little bit of Alito and said that he actually has a reproductive justice lens and doesn't even know it. Because he said, basically, there's no stigma to being a single mom, and all this support that mothers have to have a baby. You can't get fired, like all these protections. I was like, oh, so maybe he means universal health. Like if he's saying the right to have a child and to parent with the support, because he believes there's more support that's out there than there is. I mean, obviously I was, tongue in cheek, but in his mind, that third pillar is there.
Okay.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
That's when you look out the window, like when somebody says Lakeview, and you're like, oh, I see that sliver.
Yeah.
That apartment.
I mean, he didn't. Of course, he didn't use that language, but in his view, there is support for all these things. There is pillar number 3.
But I don't want us to, as we talk about Roe falling, we also need to sit with the history of the reproductive health and rights movement in Illinois. We gave the country the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment, which precludes the use of government funding for coverage of abortion only in certain circumstances, came from Representative Henry Hyde, who was in Illinois. It was at the point that the Hyde Amendment was instituted in the mid-70s that access to abortion care was cut off for Black, Indigenous people of color. And the reproductive health and rights communities across the country never listened to women of color, and especially Black women, who said, y'all, we need to get the Hyde Amendment repealed. We were always told it's never the right time. We don't have the legislative support at the federal level, right? And so now here we sit with Roe v. Wade getting ready to be overturned, when in reality, I hope the lesson that we learned from this, because this is a teachable moment, because the work should have been done years ago, decades ago, to get the Hyde Amendment repealed.
Yes.
And that that we would even fathom trying to have Roe codified, last month? What are we thinking?
Right.
That should have been done actually during the Obama administration, maybe even the Clinton administration.
Yes.
But why would we think we could get Roe codified last month? That was never going to happen. That was just for show. And what we don't need is for show. We need not just words, but we need action.
Right.
Yeah.
So that history is important. I say often, past is prologue, and this is where we sit right now. And so this is a question from the audience, and y'all bear with me because we got some questions from you, and I know we're running a little bit over, because this is an important question.
Uh-oh.
Because, I mean, it's about white women. How can white women especially, right, support this issue at this point? I have an opinion about second wave feminists, where we were in 1973 and the 70s, who had power, who had the ability to push and get these things done, and they were left undone. And so now here we are.
Here we are.
So, but it's the question for you.
Wait, she said, it's a question for you. And did no, you didn't just do the black girl. And
yes,
then looked at me like, I think it's important to realize that reproductive justice is for everybody. We all need reproductive justice. White women need reproductive justice. Because the efforts or Roe falling, as I said earlier, is part about the fear of the white population of the increasing number of black and brown people in this country, right? But at the same time, this is a direct attack on black and brown women and pregnant, capable people. But also what I think white men and women can do is be allies, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about abortion access. Don't think that everybody else is safe.
Marriage equality,
This is about marriage equality. This is about education and critical race theory. This is about voting rights.
Yes.
The redistricting and the gerrymandering that is happening in the South now, this is what this is about. Even I was just got a couple of my friends in the audience. Y'all raise y'all's hands.
Hi,
and actually,
friends.
one of the founding mothers.
Everybody raise their
One of
hand.
the
We're all
founding
friends.
mothers of BWRJ is actually in the audience. Raise your hand, Drew Johnson. Thank you. Raise your hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But we were talking about the fact that the feds raised the interest rate by 3/4 percentage point.
Yes.
We should all be thinking about that. And what does it mean for people who don't have access to economic resources and income? When we look at the inflated rates of the housing market and the cost of housing, the interest rates have now went up. And so that means something in terms of people being able to purchase housing and to get car loans. Everything has went up. So this thing is impacting all of us. None of us are safe, and we shouldn't think we're safe.
That reminds me of Audre Lorde. Like, your silence does not make you safe, and it doesn't. So Natalie, one final question for you. Your dialogue in the feature clip captures the tone of fear that typifies the culture in the abortion rights space. Do you think that this fear of anti-abortion reactions and resistance to alternative messaging divides along generational lines or some other fault line?
That's a good question. I don't know that it's a generational. That's not what I discovered.
Okay.
I feel like women, even of the same, I mean, these two women are of the same age group and who've been doing this work and so have experienced it. And when I talked to Nakia in Memphis, like,
Yes.
she was like, yeah, when Afia Center put that up, we were all talking about it. So I haven't seen any indication that it's like young people, like, let's do it. And, you know, because we're young and we're fearless.
Is it class?
I should say I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's just people having different opinions, and because they're all doing the work. So these aren't people who are doing something, because I mean, the social media response, maybe that falls on generational lines in the play, but not necessarily. Because I think self-care was a radical thing to say. Because when I saw that billboard in 2018, I was like, whoa, I felt a certain kind of way. But then I had to stop. I mean, I didn't go tweeting about it or writing about it, but I stopped and said, why? And that's when I called Nakia. I was like, why do I feel? And she was like, girl, everybody does. And like, we're figuring this out. And there was backlash, and, you know, but this is what self-care is. So I think it's the people who've been doing this work who had the language, and they're bringing, I don't think young people were calling abortion self-care.
Yeah.
I think it was a radical framework from women who have that Black feminist lens, who've been in RJ work. And not that young people can't be, but it's just a different, on the ground doing the work. You know, the women I'm depicting, the women I've talked to, they're not all academics, like they're working in clinics. So it's a practical experience. I would say that it's just more, what the play is challenging is the single abortion story. Mm-hmm. And that's been entrenched for decades. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I write this in the introduction, I grew up as a young woman in the 90s where it was the Clinton era, keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. Yeah. And rare has its own, I don't think they were trying to be stigmatizing, but when you know, but like you just know things differently. And what's an acceptable abortion? What does pop culture teach us about abortion? You know, I'm a avid soap opera lover, which is a fun fact about me. And people always talk about Maude having an abortion on TV. Right. And I say, well, you know what? Erica Kane on All My Children was the first woman to have an abortion after Roe. And she was married. Yeah. And she was like, I want to be a model. I don't want to have a baby. That was, I mean, I can do a whole thing about soap operas being radical and ahead of their time, but in post 1973,
characters, but that's a whole other thing. Okay.
I mean, that wasn't, oh, I'm too old or I'm too poor. It was like, nah, I just don't want to do this.
Right. My choice. Yeah. I get to decide.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. This time went by so fast. I got a whole bunch of stuff that I need to say to wrap it up. We didn't even talk about men, which is a whole other thing about their role in all of this. So many of you may not be aware that we know we do know one of their roles. Sorry. Words. All the words. Many of you may not be aware that Dr. Bond is partnering with CFW to assess the reproductive justice movement in the Chicago region, and we're looking for ways to increase capacity, and we're investing, building opportunities to support this network in the region to reclaim, as she said, what is our right, the Midwest's rightful place, Chicago's rightful place. And so we're really excited about that. And so more to come about that. I've already mentioned like 5 times that the play, CFW is hosting Natalie's play.
It's on the back of your program.
It's on the back of your program, and some flyers, some pluggers. I'm like old school, take a plugger. Take a party plugger. So I wanted to also do that. I want to say a couple of things. I want to again thank the Chicago Public Library, all the people I thanked before, Commissioner Brown, Vivian Harsh, research collection, for opening the doors, for making this possible. I want to thank you for coming. This was a free event. It costs to put on an event like this. And so if you are so inclined, there's information on how to text to give to CFW to support this work. As I stated, this is a seminal issue for us. We are investing more and more resources, and our ability to do that means we are raising more and more money to funnel that money, because abortion providers frontline providers, the security, lawyers, all of the things that we're not even thinking about today are going to be required. So if you can also donate online, cfw.org. We can't do this work alone, and I want to thank you all for being in this fight. You know, the information that you received tonight, think about it, right? These are things that we need to be planning ahead. We are 50 years behind. We are 50 years behind. But it is here, it's at our door. Consider us a resource. And again, come see us again on July 9th at Natalie's play. And I want to thank the CFW staff who put this all together and made it possible. Undersung heroes, our communications team, our events team. Thank you so very much, and thank all of you. I think I got all the things.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
You know what, Felicia tagged me, like, I didn't see it, but she tagged me that you were on, but I missed it.
How are you? So good to see you and to meet you. Thank you so much. We're trying to keep saying that. We try. Don't look at me.